already. We give a lot of prizes around papers at graduation, but all three of the Abrahamic faiths, Judaism, Christianity, Islam, have very strong oral traditions. So preaching is something that is found in all three of them, and it's something that we want to celebrate here as a seminary. So a couple things to keep in mind as you're listening. Our speakers, our preachers come from different traditions. So we have Muslim and Christian speakers from all different traditions. So they're preaching to different contexts and different forms. So keep that in mind. Wanted to introduce our judges, our three fabulous judges. I might have you guys just each introduce yourself, say your name and sentence about your association with Hartford Seminary, and maybe your religious tradition. Oh, they go Christian. Go ahead. There's one turn around. Yeah, turn around, please.
Hi, everyone. I'm Rabbi Deborah Cantor. I'm a rabbi close by here in Bloomfield, Connecticut, and I've been rabbi for about another week. It'll be 31 years. In whatever field you find yourself in, whatever you do after you leave this seminary, you're going to find a million opportunities to give forth a message, and to be able to give forth that message clearly and forcefully, and with a sense that after people hear you, they want to go out and they're inspired to do something, to see the world in a different way. You've really made an impact. So I'm so thrilled that you asked me to be here tonight, and I'm Jewish.
Which was an excellent event last year, and I'm hoping that it's the same or even better this year. So I'm really looking forward to the speakers, and good luck, everybody. Woo!
Hello, I'm Benjamin Watts. I'm Faculty Associate, Religion and Community Life, and I teach homiletics here as well. And I look forward to a wonderful evening. And just Rabbi, since you mentioned how many years, let me just up you a little bit. I was ordained as a very small baby. In a couple of months, I would have been pastoring 34 years.
Thank you, fabulous judges. So while we have judges here, and this is a competition, the prize is $500, and between the last chapel and the accolades getting a prize, we want to just emphasize that Those are our presenters. Someone is going to be going, oh, yeah, thank you. Where was that there? You were first. Okay, so someone is going to be going first tonight because he's going to have to dip out a little bit early. So I'm going to just put him first already. And then I'm going to call your name. Please remember, preachers, please remember your order because or we already did it.
The last time it was just like after everyone.
Oh, okay. Should we do that?
Yeah.
Okay, all right, so then it'll be some suspense. So, all right, someone, why don't you come up? And then after you, I'll draw the names so you know that you're on.
Yes, one.
All right, after this, we're on to the Lakia. Thank you, everybody.
Is there a timer or should I just set it on?
I will start.
Okay.
So I'll be setting a timer for 8 minutes. So if you hear the ding go off, finish your thought or your sentence, but not your paragraph. Go ahead.
I'm going to give a speech that I would typically give at a Friday sermon, as many of you know. I serve as the imam at the Hartford Valley American Muslim Center, and the biggest challenge for me is going to keep it under 8 minutes, not 10, 8 minutes. I'm trying to get Bismillah. We begin, as we often do in our faith tradition, not necessarily with words, but with silence. And we start not necessarily by beseeching and asking, but by thanking, by showing gratitude as much as we can. We are grateful for the fact that we have each other, grateful for the fact that He has brought us together, not just in body and mind, but in soul and spirit. And they say that you don't really know what you have, or the blessings you have, until they're taken away from you. But God works in mysterious ways. Sometimes He reminds you of a blessing, just because. I was getting ready the other day, and after I did my morning ritual, taking a shower, getting ready, getting dressed, and I was about to head downstairs, and I saw my mother push the ottoman that she has in our living room and put it in front of the doorway. And the door was wide open, and the sunlight was coming directly on her face. And she enjoys that. And she would sit with this huge mug, this really unhealthy sized mug, that she has with chai, with tea in it, and 2 slices of bread. And this is typical, I see this all the time. And I was staring at her. And I'm just actually thinking about the imagery now. But for some reason, and there was no catalyst to this, but I was staring at my mother, and there was tears coming down my eyes. And I was just looking at her. She was taking a piece of bread, dipping in a pool of chai, putting it in her mouth, and I watched her eat the entire 2 pieces of bread, with tears and this emotion coming over me. The blessing of having parents, the blessing of having a generation before you who is able to tell you and guide you. And I could think, and I think now, that she must have looked at me the same way. Me eating whatever I was eating, right, making a mess, and she's probably looking at me with tears and wondering, I hope everything's going to be okay of this child of mine. And all of our parents have that. And if you talk to your loved ones, and you talk to especially those who are older in your older generation, you hear these stories of the weight that they carried on their shoulders so that they can make our lives easier. And it's often true, especially in all faith traditions, I think this is universal, that all of us are trying to leave this earth better than we found it. Not just for our sake, or for the sake of those who are coming after us. And you hear these stories of our parents. Forget just our parents. If you want to hear real stories, hear the story of our grandparents, right? Walking to school uphill both sides, right? How is that possible, Grandma? Oh, but it was possible, I believe it. But why do these hear these stories? Why is it that they talk about these things all the time? It's because they want to make sure that we have it better than they did. It's as if, if you just, follow along this image image I'm creating, is as if they have this boulder on their shoulders, and they're carrying it for us. And they're saying, once you get old enough, you'll be stronger than I will be, and you'll be able to carry this. Or I'll carry most of it by the time your time comes, it'll be very light for you. And it'll be easy for you. And I think that's what I was thinking in words that couldn't describe that moment when I was looking at my mother. And if you look at that, if you talk about the Islamic framework and paradigm, if you look at that, you see the questions that we have. We don't just write about what is, we also try to write about why. And about the legacies of the companions of the Prophet who must be carrying boulders that are mountains compared to the burdens that we are carrying. What they had to carry was much more immense and much more divine in a sense than we have to labor with. And it goes all the way generation before until you reach to the man in Islam claims perfection manifest in the world. And that is Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And then he is carrying this enormous weight. And then the words of God are coming, the revelation comes, as many of the professors here know how heavy and intense it was in the Prophet. That one day he was laying down his head resting, just like I was resting a few minutes ago here, and everybody making fun of me there. But he was resting, similar to how we rest, he was taking a nap, on the thigh of his companion. And if anybody's a doctor, they know the femur bone, the thigh bone, is the hardest bone to break. And when the revelation came down, and the words of God came down at that moment, the companion said, if I had not moved my thigh very quick enough, my thigh bone would have broken in half. This is the weight that was coming on. He would say he would sweat, just like I'm sweating today. In a very cold day, he would be sweating. This is the immense legacy that he had to carry for others. But the question that I pose is, why? God could have brought all of our revelations and traditions and stories in a silver platter, in gold pages, in embroidery of silk. He could have. But there was a struggle attached to it. Why? Generation after generation comes. This struggle attached so that the future generations don't have that. So why is it the prophet is carrying this burden? Is it so that he can say to his children and his cousins and his family members, I want you to be financially taken care of? Are they doing it so they can say to the young ones, I don't want you to have to walk to school, I can get you a Is that why they're doing it? Is that the legacy? And is that the reason why they're carrying this immense weight on their shoulders? Why are they doing it? And the answer that I could, in my humble estimation that I would claim, is in the verse that is recited ad nauseum this time of the year. Before Ramadan and every Jum'ah prayer and every Friday prayer, this verse is recited all the time. And you know when you're coming into the khutbah, you're going to hear this verse. And the verse is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, God may be glorified. He says, fasting is obligatory upon you. Just like it was made obligatory on those before you. Why? So that all of you may get taqwa. You may achieve God consciousness, an awareness of God. What's interesting here is not just what he said, and not to get too much into the grammar. He said this ritual is obligatory. Why is it obligatory? Because you will get God consciousness. What's interesting is in between these two things, he says something very interesting. He says, just like those before you have to do it. Interesting, isn't it? Why mention that? It's about legacy. It's about generating this generational wealth we often speak about. That we're trying to just not make it so that we're financially better for our loved ones. That there's educational choices that our kids can have that maybe I didn't. Or I have that my father did. Not just for that sake, those are good pursuits as well. But also so that when they become older, that they are aware of God himself, of all the rituals that we're going to do in Ramadan. In the month of fasting, the holiest month, we're going to be reciting Quran. The night prayer will be extended. People will try to not gossip at night. They will try to do as much as possible. Oh my goodness. Right? I'll finish right away. But what's interesting is all the rituals that we do in Ramadan, 99% of rituals that we have in Islam, they did not come down until 13 years after the prophecy started. Isn't that interesting? Except for prayer, every other ritual, from divorce, from family law to inheritance law, came 13 years after the prophecy had been established. The question is, what was going on in those 13 years? God consciousness was being cultivated. So the people were very few in that moment, in those first 13 years, but the people who were theirs were the likes of Imam Ali, were the likes of Abu Bakr, were the likes of Umar, were the likes of Khadijah. And similarly for us, it's not about having an action item for Ramadan, because the bullet points of what we should and shouldn't do in Ramadan are plenty. But it's a mental note. It's a legacy that we have to create. And then when we are older, we can look at our children, our loved ones, and say, I have left the earth better for them. Not only in the sense that they have better feet to stand upon, but because they know how to get closer to their God. And that is the best blessing of all. Thank you very much.
Judges, do you need a couple minutes, or can we just move on to the next? Do you need a couple minutes?
Entertainment menu.
Okay, we're going to do 1 minute entertainment. Judges have a minute to.
Intermission. Someone puts an answer to lights up and stuff. I want to see what they We should have thought that. I know a bunch. Just do one.
I know one that I never know, I think.
What, are you serious? Okay, Liza, why don't we, yeah, we need to do one. This is not a private conversation. This is not a
You're probably like,
Oh yeah, I was
The whole time about 30 minutes, first 30 minutes we're trying to make like the first 5 minutes in Arabic, and get away with that kind of like prayers and verses, so you have to so I try to get to 25.
But the thing is, the church service is like 2 hours. That's insane.
Yeah, no, in my church in an hour, we perform a wedding, Asian baptism.
See, that's nice. Most of the ones I've gone to, it's like a lot. And I'm like,
let's give it up for Lakia, and then go ahead. As Lakia's making it up, I'm just going to draw the next name so you know you're on deck. David is on deck.
You got this.
I would like to open up with prayer. I would like to pray for my brother. He has sickle cell, and today's his birthday. He's 33. And I would like to send a special prayer that God prolong his life. And also, I would like to pray for all the Hartford Seminary students and graduates that they continue to stay on the correct path, whatever path that God leads them. Amen. I believe that we love you. God decides a number of stars and gives all of them their names. The first time I read this Bible verse, I knew God was speaking to me. During my life, I always felt extra special. Attending church and being dedicated has explained my purpose in life. Hear God saying within you, I am with you. Because he hath set his love upon me, therefore will I deliver him. I will set him on high, because he hath known my name. To hear God say, this reassured my safety. Knowing that in his love, God has for me. For the rest of my life to eternity, I have placed him first in my life. Thank you for the opportunity.
All right, judges, do you want to take a minute?
Yes.
to the church at Corinth, chapter 4, verses 6 and 7. And Paul writes, "For God, who said, 'Let light shine out of darkness,' made his light to shine in our hearts, to give us the light of the knowledge of the glory of God in Christ. But we have this treasure in jars of clay, to show that this all-surpassing power is from God and not us." May God add a blessing to the readers and hearers and doers of the word. I got a call recently from a friend of mine, Dan. I haven't spoken to him in a few years. He gave me a quick update on his family and his work. And he paused and he said, "David, I'm so glad that your life is great." And I paused. And I had a moment, like on a TV sitcom, where I had a flashback of what had happened in my life since I last spoke to him. The end of a marriage, passing of my parents, the end of a 25-year career with not a lot of certainty about what might come. And in this pause to break the silence, Dan said, "Well, at least what I see on Facebook." And I thought, this is where my perfectionism and where I can hide, one of the places where it is evident. And it got me thinking, forget about social media, it got me thinking about my relationships, and on a larger scale, our relationships. And it turns out we're living in a time of a great conundrum. We're more connected than ever, yet we're more disconnected than ever. In 2018, there was a loneliness index survey that was done. They found that 46% of us feel lonely, sometimes or always. And 43% of us say that our relationships lack meaning. And perhaps most shocking, 50% of us say, "No one knows me well." Half of us, half of our colleagues, half of our classmates, half of our families. For me, and I believe for many others, shame is what's behind this. It's something that keeps us from finding connection with one another and finding connection with God. My friends, the hardest thing for us to believe and to accept is that God truly makes no mistakes, and that each of us, just as we are loved and valuable and accepted. It's demonstrated right from the beginning in the creation story. Adam and Eve, in their shame, hide and flee, afraid of their innermost persons becoming known. We see it in the example of Peter, a night of fishing and no fish. Jesus comes along and says, "Take me out on the boat." Peter says, "Now, during the day." And they go, and the nets are filled to the point of breaking. Now, Peter doesn't take a selfie or do a post about, "Hey, this guy knows where the fish are." He says, "Depart from me, because if he knows where the fish are found during the day, what might he know about me?" So each of us here, called to be here by name, have that all-surpassing power within, and we have to be brave enough not to hide those jars of clay, brittle, vulnerable, chipped, broken parts, broken hearts, failures, missed opportunities, messily glued together. See, those are the parts where the light shines the brightest. And that's how we heal our shame, is when we share those parts of ourselves. Consider the woman with the issue of blood. Jesus says, "Who touched my garment?" And she declared in the presence of all the people for what cause she touched him. And at that point, he doesn't call her woman anymore. He says daughter, from a stranger to a beloved family member. I am fortunate enough to be friends with a woman named Roseanne Haggerty. Roseanne is probably the country's most decorated nonprofit leader, a MacArthur Genius, and Ashoka Fellow, a Smithsonian Design Award Institute. I could literally go on. We had coffee recently, and I asked her about her work. See, Roseanne has housed over 200,000 homeless people. And I wanted to know how you do it. And I had my pen and my notebook ready, and I was ready for a dissertation on tax and land trusts and socio-political and economic perspectives. She looked at me and she said, the answer is so simple, it stopped me in my tracks. You have to get to know each person, because we can't move them to the next place until we know the story of how they got to where they are. This is how we find that light in each other. This is the power of knowing and sharing our stories. Why did I reach out to touch the hem of his garment? That's what moves us to our next home, and we demonstrate strength in our weakness. My favorite moment this semester didn't happen in the classroom. I'm sorry, Dr. Watts. It happened in the men's room of all places. It's true. I was on a class break and I was getting ready to go back to class, and I approached the sink to quickly wash my hands, and my beautiful classmate Saffron was there. His hat was off, and his sleeves were rolled up past his elbow, and I truly didn't know what was about to happen. And the look on my face was questioning at best, maybe, if I'm honest, a little judgmental. It would have been easy for him to say, "Excuse me," and let me pass, but he didn't. He said, "Let me show you how I prepare for prayer." And in that moment, in his vulnerability, we found ourselves in the presence of God. That's what we're called to be that light, to be vulnerable, and to let that all-surpassing power shine to each other and to the world around us. For indeed, God is doing a new thing. Amen.
Yeah, don't go on there. No one's gonna see you. You go.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما. In the name of Allah, the most merciful, the most gracious. I will start reading the Quran about God's blessing, and I'll read the translate after. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم وإذا سألك عبادي عني فإني قريب أجيب دعوة الداع إذا دعان فاستجيبوا لي وليؤمنوا بي So we want to be from the few people who are thankful for everything we have from God. Having friends, it's a blessing. Having this community, Hartford Seminary, a blessing, a place for us to come together and share our feeling and share our faith without fear. We walk with safety. We don't worry about if I walk, somebody will come and harm me or do something. So we have to be thankful to God what He's doing to us. So shukr, that's the word in the Quran. It says shukra and ushkuru. So that word, it's to be thankful to God for all the bounties and the blessings that we have. So it's one thing to recognize the blessing we have from God, but the second most important thing is these blessings are coming from God as a gift for us. So the nature is a gift for us. We have to be thankful for it. So this is the two important things. We sometimes say, oh, I have this, I'm glad, I'm happy. But then I do not refer back to Allah. I do not refer back to God. I would not say this is coming from me. This is just like because I worked hard, I have so many jobs, I have so many money, because I am a good person, so this is coming from me, but it's not. It's going back to God. He is giving us as a gift. So, we are not in a perfect life. Everybody has a lot of difficulties, and everyone we face some difficult time. And this is natural to all of us. It's not something only specifically for me or for one person. We all face these difficulties sometimes, but our actions, our response to these difficulties is the difference. We have two choices. Only two. I don't say there's more than that. I say two choices. Either you are going to be so angry, why this happened to me? Why I did not get accepted at the school? Why I did not get A in the grade? Why I did not do this and why I did not get this car? And all of this, like, why you don't have enough money to get what you want? Other option, you say, no, whatever I have, whatever decision it happened, whatever things that I have in my life, I'm grateful for it. And I am sure God has a reason for me to get that thing, right? So we have to trust God and be grateful and wait and be patient. And I have so many stories I shared with my friends, like in the past. I had a lot of struggle, but I know everybody has a lot of struggle in life. But when I face these difficulties, right away I say, okay, it's very hard for me to handle it. I will not do it. I will ask God to help me with it. So I trust you, God. You take care of me. You do everything. And then I will just be grateful for what happened to me. So then later on, after a while, like 1 year or something, you can see the blessing is coming from that thing that happened to us back. And you will see the manifestation of God, how He gave you things. Okay, so I hope we will not be like the little boy who his mom, he was walking and a man gave him a little orange, and then his mom told him what you should say to the man. And then he returned it back and he said, "Heal it for me." He chose to say, like, he asked for more, right? Or he could say, "Thank you for giving me this." So it's our choice to choose which way we respond to these things. So, okay, so now, how should we, really, how should we be thankful to God? From my perspective, and from what I read in the Quran and reading some scholars and things like that, I really feel we need to build our community together everywhere we go. So one of the things that we should be thankful to God, first things is to be thankful to others, to all of us, to my friends, to my family, to my parents, to everybody that I met in my life. If someone give you a napkin, you should thank that person for giving you this. Right? Everything keeps saying it. We should have sympathy toward each other to really show that I thank you for doing it. I appreciate this help you are doing. Even though it's something that I repeat a lot, I say thank you a lot, because I want to be from the few people that want to thank God for doing it. Yes, so you have the paper. Yes. I would like all of you, just like you can say it loudly, but all at the same time. So all of us together, we will share whatever you feel, whatever you are blessed with. Say, I'm thankful for. You say whatever. So, okay. So let's all
Perfect.
thank God
All
for
right.
what we have.
All right.
I'm thankful
Thankful
for
for
what we have.
Thankful for Joshua and Megan and Hannah and I'm thankful for Jesus. I'm thankful for my husband. I'm my cat Wally. I'm thankful for all these amazing professors. Oh, they'll give me a good grade. I'm thankful for Dr. Joshua. All right, so you get the most amount of flowers up. Look at this. Did she already win? I might. Like, I'll see. I'll see if I win. Amy's next.
Okay, all right, let's give it up for Amy. And then Olga is our caboose, and I can write quickly.
Oh, she's awesome.
The last one, yeah.
Let's go, Amy! Oh, I'm sorry.
Have you ever been in a situation such as a public gathering, a meal, or a prayer service where everyone paused for a moment of silence? Have you ever thought to yourself, why are we doing this? I know I have. But by now, I have come to experience the profound beauty and sacred wisdom that arises from maintaining periods of spiritual silence. I would like to share some of that with you today. Our Holy Scriptures speak of the important spiritual benefits of practicing silence and quiet. In the Hebrew Bible, the prophet Elijah experienced God through the still, small voice. It reads, "The earthquake came a fire, but the Lord was not in the fire. And after the fire came a gentle whisper." In the Christian New Testament, Jesus often did not give answers when it was expected, and instead remained silent. Within Islam, the Prophet Muhammad said that if a person is given silence, he is given wisdom. Within the Quaker tradition, to which I relate, prolonged silence is integral. Quakers will sometimes spend their entire gatherings for worship in silence. Similarly, in the Christian monastic traditions, collective and individual silence is important to their daily routine. I have been among both of these groups for extended periods to live within their silence. So, why do we practice silence? Silence invites us into the environment that is open to the movement of God. It removes distractions that compel us and the thoughts that bother us to refocus on what matters most. It serves to remind us that only half of prayer is speaking
to God. Our silence is when we open ourselves up to listen for God's voice. For God's still, small, gentle, calming voice. Have you ever seen a beautiful mountain or sunset or beach that leaves you awestruck, that you can do nothing else in the moment but soak it all in? You see, silence is not empty space. Silence is a paradox because it really teaches us and reveals to us how full and incredible and magnificent things are. The big becomes small. The simple becomes complex. Our amazing and majestic God comes to us in the most intimate and accessible ways. In fact, science supports this idea that silence is good for us. It has been found to lower our blood pressure, boost the immune system, and formal studies have revealed that it relieves tension and enhances the part of the brain responsible for learning and memory. I believe that through our practice of silence, we are also better equipped as peacemakers and as leaders. It strengthens our empathy, our compassion, and our willingness to listen. By practicing silence, we become reflections of our God who works through the silence, stillness, and peace. From here, I invite you to be transformed by the silence. Allow it to teach you to choose your words carefully, minister more thoughtfully, listen more intently, and forge your spiritual path more faithfully. Be richly blessed. Amen.
I feel bad for the judges. You guys should me the award. I've probably been talking more.
Yeah, I see what's going on there.
You should just give it a prompt.
I should. I'm talking so
Your
good.
name exposed.
I can do it. I totally got something on right now. If I dedicate my sermon to Professor Grafton, can I get an A in my final? What if I win because of the sermon?
I'd just like to say a quick prayer before I begin. Our God, creator of heaven and earth and all that exists, we open our hearts to be receptive and hear your word today. In Jesus' name, amen. As you know, my name is Olga. This evening, I'd like to talk to you about depending and relying on God. We sometimes look to earthly places and things to find comfort, to soothe our pains and or people get caught up in their addictions or even lose themselves in their circumstances, not knowing that you're feeding the fleshly body and slowly putting your spirit into a pit. No matter what you're doing, God still loves you and always will. Call on God when you're feeling weak, when you need guidance and strength. The enemy will try anything to keep us busy, feeling guilty, ashamed, and in self-condemnation. God destined you and me for greatness. Don't let the enemy talk you out of it. I struggled being a people pleaser, trying to make everyone happy. During that time, my peace was interrupted, and it was against who I was, just to keep me staying in peace. I learned to rely and depend on God. In John 14:27, Jesus states, "Peace I leave with you, my perfect peace I give to you. Not as the world gives, do I give to you. Do not let your hearts be troubled, nor let it be afraid. Let my perfect peace calm you in every circumstance and give you courage and strength for every challenge." No matter what our setbacks may be, your season is coming into fruition. What God started in your life, He will bring it to pass. Keep your head up in the tough times, you will make it through. Surround yourself with positive people, the ones that will encourage you and lift you up. And if you're unable to find people like that, don't worry. You can encourage and motivate yourself as well. I want you to know that God is listening and is waiting to answer your prayers. God wants us to rely and depend on Him for everything in our lives. He is always available to us. When you're feeling down, think of all the good things God has done in your life. And know that you are the righteousness of God in Christ. And you will rise much higher when you rely and depend on Him for all your needs. He is your divine security. You're going to be okay. Let God lead the way. Thank you.
Sorry guys, that was way too much fun. Inshallah, I love you both.
Deciding we could judge spokesperson. I think Dr. Watts was.
This has been wonderful, and each of you have really, really touched us, and I cannot tell you how impressed I am with all of your styles, your different voices and clarity with which you've spoken. Each of us were in the room, and it was just such a difficult decision tonight because all of you were just so fantastic that this is only the second time I've done this, so I guess we're setting precedent at this early stage. But we had our moment where we wanted to figure out how can we split it, do something different, because we just could not come down to one person. So what will happen this year with the support of the administration is we'll split the prize this year between two individuals who will take the prize, and we are excited to announce that Safwan and David are the winners.